Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 61st edition of the Frankenstein Chat. And we have an eminent guest with us this morning. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning. Good morning, Frank. Good morning, Stan.
Good morning, Michael.
And as you can see, Stan's with us again. Yeah, I had a few days in North Wales this week, I believe, Stan.
One night. Just we're doing work.
Michael,
the caravan idea was supposed to be the opportunity to relax. Seems to be you just go and do more work.
Michael, I'm sure that many people will know you, and I'm sure there are people joining because they know you're a guest. But for those who don't know who you are, could you just explain what you do and a little bit about your career? Be helpful, I think.
Yeah, of course. Well, I've been involved in the education sector for almost 15 years now, which is hard to believe. I trained as a lawyer and ended up moving into the far more interesting, to my mind, realms of education policy and education policy development, work at the National College for School Leadership for a number of years. Since I left there, I've been developing kind of education businesses and ideas. So working with Forum Strategy, I'm the CEO of Forum Strategy, which is a leadership development organization predominantly for CEOs and executive leaders in academy trusts. We're also part think tank in a way. You know, we've spent a lot of time over the last 7 or 8 years trying to be constructive in how we inform the development of the academy trust sector in a way that I guess ensures that it's working in the best interest of children and young people, and you know, is efficient and effective. And there's been a lot of learning through the last 7 or 8 years as that sector has developed. I'm also chair and co-owner of Satis Education, which is an ethical recruitment organisation supporting executive leadership in the education sector. So that's an interesting dimension to my work as well.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I got to know you through, you reached out to me because of the focus within the co-op on community. And I think I've been struck by the fact that you're trying to sort of look ahead, you know, and it's not about, I mean, obviously you're concerned about now, but it's actually looking at trends as they're emerging. So I think that community aspect is, I mean, I think it hasn't gone away, has it? From all accounts, well, during the pandemic, it's been central to the success of schooling, really. So you're a bit ahead of your time there.
Well, I think it's more that, you know, I think any organisation, whether you're Forum Strategy, the DFE, or an individual academy trust, has got a limited bandwidth in terms of, you know, its ability to kind of look outwards and see the trends as they emerge. I think that the strength of Forum is that we are a network. We bring people together, which is, you know, there's wisdom in the crowd almost, really. I think one thing we're really passionate about is that some of the, and we'll probably come onto this as we go through the conversation, but some of the big challenges, but also the big opportunities for this generation of children, young people, often fall under the radar through the noise of, you know, government policy or whatever's making the press this week, you know. So as an organisation, we're really quite passionate about cutting through the noise and identifying, you know, some of those key trends that, you know, from kind of the digital agenda, which we may talk about a bit more, to, you know, how we as an education system stay in tune with, you know, the way the economy is evolving and developing, and some of the key needs of our communities as well. And academy trusts, I think, in the first 5 years, you know, there was definitely an emphasis on policy. There was definitely an emphasis on central development of that system. I think one of the really exciting things of the last 2 or 3 years is that we've got kind of the second generation of academy trust leaders and trustees that recognise they need to look upwards to DFE and Ofsted and be aware of all of that. But actually, you know, they've got the freedom and autonomy to respond to the needs of their communities and kind of reflect the aspirations and needs of the communities in the vision, and be accountable to communities as well. So I think we've seen a bit of a shift towards that, not entirely across the system, you know, but I think there's definitely a move to academy trusts serving localities, local communities, and being accountable to them. And if we get that right across the system, it could be a really powerful thing.
Yeah, definitely. Right, Stan, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, it's talk about centralisation and lack of autonomy. It's the guidance from the DfE for COVID post September the 4th, where the contact tracing responsibility leaves the schools and goes to the national, is it NHS test and trace?
I think
Track and trace. It's their organisation, and it says quite clearly in the guidance that they will contact the children who've been positive and ask them for the contact details of their close contacts. Well, I just think they don't know the contact deal. Can you imagine asking a 4-year-old who they've been next to in school all day? They won't, they don't even know the names. I mean, my daughter used to talk about somebody called Half a McNamara, this child, and we used to say, "What? Half a McNamara? Yeah, that's his name." It turned out to be Arthur. Well, my point is that I don't think test and trace can operate like that. Even if they do trace people, children, it's still only guidance that they then take a PCR test. If they don't say anything and they're back in school, I don't see how we can contain any kind of virus if that's the model. Maybe the model is so that we don't contain it. Well, that's the conspiracy theory.
It is, yeah. Okay, Michael, what's caught your eye this week?
Well, I think it'd be remiss not to mention the football and the success of the England team so far. And what a game! I was on the road as well this week, Stan, and I was in, of all places, Hatfield on Wednesday evening, and I've actually enjoyed a little bit of the coming together socially after all this 16 months of watching the football. It's in a safe way, but it's been quite nice to begin to see friends and watch the football. But as many people will recognise, when you're on the road in a hotel somewhere working away, you're in a bar, and so I had the opportunity to watch the football on Wednesday evening by myself, which was a bit strange, but what a terrific game it was, and what a nail-biting game it was. And I think one of the great things this week has just been that sense of togetherness, as a result of the football. I've got some strong ties to Wales and South Wales, so I do feel, quite a little sad that Wales aren't with us now in the competition. But that sense of togetherness has been nice to see after what's felt like quite a divisive 16 months, whether we're just physically away from people or, there's been a lot of kind of politics around, hasn't there, over the last 16 months, yeah, and entrenched opinion. So nice to feel that togetherness. But I think the thing that's caught my eye has been, going back to that word division and divide, has been some of the stuff coming out around the digital divide amongst young people. And UNICEF, it actually wasn't this week, it was a couple of weeks ago, UNICEF published a very interesting and timely report around the digital divide in this country. And one of the things it talked about, as we're all very mindful of, was that 8% of children and young people still don't have access to a dedicated device. And if you think after the last 16 months and that substantial amounts of learning and education have taken place online, some children will have fallen down at the first hurdle there, and that's a devastating statistic. 8% of children, young people, represents a significant number. So, but the really interesting thing I think about the UNICEF report was it went beyond that. It's fine getting devices in the hands of children and young people, but even then, there's still a divide. We've got, in this country, we've talked about the have and have-nots being, defined by poverty or lack of qualifications or not over the last 20 or 30 years. I think we've got a new category of have and have-nots now, which are, it's those children that are either the masters or the servants of technology. Technology is it's an incredible thing when you think the the opportunity to accumulate knowledge, to be creative. You know, we're in the era of the teenage entrepreneur. You know, it's fantastic to see what kids are doing in a really creative, constructive way online. You know, it's the wealth of opportunity here is enormous. You know, think about the green economy and, you know, how that's kind of driven by tech. But I think we're also seeing, you know, kind of the emergence of the servants of technology, sadly. You know, the children, young people that are, you know, for want of a better word, the addicts of technology, you know, on the social media late into the evening. What does that do for learning the next day? You know, misinformation, and that's my worry, really, that and pulling them away from being outside and in the open air and socializing. So I think there's a huge job, not just for the education system, but for society here to help children, young people, and some adults navigate this new world, because it's going to be defining. You know, it really is going to be defining. And I don't think, you know, we're off the starting blocks. I know the government has been doing lots of work to get devices into the hands of children, young people, and that's great. But you know, we need, and I don't think it will come from government, and I don't think government are necessarily the right people to provide the direction here, but I think we need trusts, we need schools, we need industry, we need everybody working together to think, you know, how do we keep kids safe, but also develop, you know, some of the self-regulation and the skills to make the most of all of this, you know, not let it compromise health and well-being.
It's interesting. Go on, Stan, you're going to say?
I was just saying, it goes back to something that Barry Norris was saying when he was on about you know, we don't talk about the side effects of anything. We push, you know, let's get a device into every home if we can, for every child to have. But you know, what's the downside of that? And I think this is not quite a downside, but I was talking to a head in a fairly affluent area where most children have access, if not all have access. But he was saying that they're now at a point where parents are tending to keep their children at home for lesser reasons than they would have done previously, because they know they can just log on and get the lessons via Google Classroom or whatever it is. So it's not a sort of side effect, but it's something we haven't considered to be a potential use or risk to having the technology.
Yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it, that we, you know, with regard to we're all doing this at home, or we're not in an office together doing it, and I think, was it Mike Rotherham, one of our guests who's been back twice, you know, an eminent psychologist, was saying that for his child, you know, lockdown with the right environment and the right support has been a massively positive experience, you know, in many ways, and in a way that's only possible because of technology. You know, and actually I think that there has, you know, I think the evidence suggests there has been learning loss, but sadly I think that the learning loss, and I think there was a report out today from the EPI suggesting that learning loss, you know, was more, you know, hit harder in the most disadvantaged communities, and in a way that's not just about the digital divide, that's about, you know, society, and isn't it, it's the environment in which young people are learning, and the pressure and strain that families are under. I mean, we tend not to be political, but the universal credit the universal £20 credit, you know, the universal credit £20 loss. I mean, I just find that devastating. You know, that is such a massive chunk of a hard-pressed family's income. To take that away at this moment in time really does question the sort of like the joined upness of it all, in terms of the not just the digital divide, but this is about a levelling up agenda as well for me. You know, because actually this country is going to need the efforts of every single young person, you know, to work in our favour, so that you, Michael, can have a pension and a happy retirement eventually, you know, in a prosperous country. Actually, it just seems to be, you know, it seems to me that £20 is a massive investment for your future, let alone the family's future.
Didn't the MP who said they don't really need it? he's one that got done for claiming for
Well,
2 houses within a short distance of each other in London. I just find it the hypocrisy of that at times, that people don't need this extra £20. Oh, but because I'm allowed to claim 125,000, I will do.
Yeah, I think the argument also was that there are is it 2 million people or 6 million people claiming that benefit, but I think there are currently 2 million vacancies. So the idea is that if you don't give it, then people go to work. You know, I just think that might work for a small proportion, but it's not going to resolve the issue. We're still, you know, we've still got this problem. So anyway,
Frank, a lot of those people who get that are already in work.
Yes,
they're just not paid well enough to take them out of that poverty level.
Yeah. I always find it very difficult, you know, talking about these things, because my circumstances are so different to that. Although my upbringing, you know, I do remember having to go to the head teacher's office. I wanted to study politics at what was then O level. I was rubbish at French, but I was having to, in a way, this is where the EBAC takes you as well, folks, is I knew that I wasn't going to do very well in French. I knew that, but actually was fascinated with politics, and I needed to get myself on a visit to the Houses of Parliament. And I know to this day it cost £1. But my parents didn't have that £1, so I had to go to the head, and they told me you can't go. So I brought it on myself to go to the head teacher's office and ask, would the school pay for me to go on the trip? And that head teacher said yes. And actually that changed my life, really. And I just think here about EBAC, you know, we're piling kids down routes where they already know that they're not going to succeed, and we're not giving them the opportunities that I had to sort of get involved in stuff that really genuinely interests them, you know. So, and I was at the Times Education Commission in Bradford this week, trying to make that point. We had a number of head teachers saying, you know, what was the one thing you could do that you would bring? And they all said EBAC. EBAC's just making the curriculum so harsh for those children, for, you know, those children that are not, whatever reason, you know, maybe they're not being taught well, it may be other reasons, but they're not going to achieve the grade 4 in English and mathematics. We need to find a way in which we can actually sort of excite them again, but we can't, because we're saddled with this EBAC target. And there's this concern about that being such a heavy measure, you know, in terms of the way in which they're going to be judged.
Well, isn't it an easy fix? I mean, I think fixing the EBAC is a really easy thing to do. All you need to do is put an arts element in it. It's not a major shift to say we could have an arts element in. And if they did that, then that would open the EBAC up to a lot more students. And, you know, in terms of the economy, the creative media side of the economy is a massive income for us.
Well, that's where TikTok and stuff, kids are showing how creative they are.
Yeah.
I think aspiration is a big word here, you know, and I think we underestimate the aspiration of children, young people at our peril, really. You know, it's your example, Frank, you know, and there will be thousands of examples of children, young people that are just looking for the opportunity, whether it's the House of Commons or whatever it may be, to go and do something like that. And I think as an education system, we've probably, you know, our measures of success and our kind of national vision as a system has become so based on quite narrow metrics and targets that are set by adults in offices, and actually we, you know, it comes back to the community accountability in a way. But you know, the Children's Society do some absolutely brilliant work, as you know, and each year they publish a report called the Good Childhood Report. And one of the most telling things I think about our education system today, and it happens every year, is that when Ofsted publish their annual report at the beginning of December, and no disrespect to Ofsted, it's an important report, but it gets huge amounts of coverage on Twitter, in the news, on social media. There's endless debate about it. And this isn't just about the press or government, it's about everyone involved in education jumps in. when the Good Childhood Report, which I think is the richest sense of, you know, the state of play for children and young people in this country, comes out in September, it barely gets a mention. And I think we've all got a responsibility there, because that's a cultural thing. It's not just a political thing. And one of the things that report has told us for a number of years now is that children and young people's well-being in this country is not comparing well to other parts of the developed world. The DFE admitted that as well in a report last year in 2020, that we're not doing great compared to other developed countries. But there are a couple of reasons for that. One is a sense of pressure in the school system that contributes to that sense of kind of low life satisfaction. The other one is a sense amongst children and young people of what the future holds and where they're going and what's possible. And I think we've got an opportunity on both counts there, just to say, actually, let's gear this system up a little bit more to what children expect of it. Just a little bit more. I'm not saying put children in head teachers' offices, but just a little bit more. And let's just get back to aspiration. Let's get back to what the potential of school is for children and young people's future lives. And of course, it's about great qualifications and academic qualifications. It's also about those rich experiences that you get going through the system. And I know so many trusts and schools do that, but how do we give them just a little bit more space to do some of that?
It's interesting though, isn't it, that if you're in this came out again at the Education Commission on Wednesday, but if you're in a position where your school is under pressure from the accountability system, and let's face it, many of those will be in the most disadvantaged areas of the country, your sort of opportunities for being bold and actually tackling that are constrained by that accountability, because you're in a way straitjacketed by that. This high risk approach which is adopted, whereby if you've got to excite an interest and whatever, but you're given such little time to change it, because somebody's going to come knocking on the doors inevitably saying, well, it's not happening quickly enough, you haven't got the evidence of impact, or you think, actually, we've only been doing it for 2 years. I mean, the chance of having sort of embedded impact, if you're getting that sort of level of improvement, you're cheating somewhere along the line. Anybody that's run an organization, forget education, will know that is not possible. You can get change, but embedding that in a 2-year position where you're really up against it is a real, well, I have yet to see it embedded and last, in the timescales that people want to. So actually that's making it very difficult for leaders to be ambitious, because they feel as though they've got to go through some of the hoops to get to a position, and then we can be ambitious, Yeah.
Which means the higher performing schools can get even more, a broader based curriculum, can do all the things that bring cultural capital to the children, and the gap widens.
Yeah.
And I know, having spoken to, trying to be ambitious for heads in really difficult situations, and they want to be, and they have all those aspirations and ideas, but then they say, but I've got Ofsted in the next 12 months, and they're not going to listen to my arts program or what I'm doing about this and that.
I was going to say, Michael, what's the tone of leadership then? I mean, in terms of that looking forward, I mean, is there much bandwidth for that at the moment, or really are people just getting through, want to get to summer and then let's just take stock?
Yeah, I think there's, I think people want to really reconnect with, why they're in this profession and why they've, the last 16 months, there's been a lot of crisis management, hasn't there? Management being the word there. Leadership too. And I think that's been, I think we've seen incredible leadership over the last 16 months in trusts and schools, as we have across public services. But I think there's a recognition that the world has changed. I think much of what we're talking about today, whether it's digital divide or you think of some of the other issues for schools, such as the recruitment challenge and being responding to employees' expectations of work, you know, because we want the best people to be having those day-to-day interactions with children and young people. All of those have been accelerated by the pandemic. So I think we're coming out of kind of this phase as we've experienced it, with actually the premium on leadership and strategic leadership has never been higher. It's just now finding the time and the bandwidth to approach some of these things. But you know, I would say this, wouldn't I? You know, Frankenstein. But you know, I think being part of an academy trust is really helpful with some of that, because you know, as a head teacher, there's a lot on your plate, but there's also the ability to partner with other schools in doing some of this, to work with this. You know, if you're in a trust with a high quality central team with IT experts and HR experts and so on, to work with them on some of this. So, you know, and going back to the issue about, you know, the challenge for head teachers in really being able to find the space to work on some of the aspirational elements and the cultural capital stuff. I think again, being in a good trust that values that kind of thing does provide some of the space and security to do it, because again, you've got the, you know, the collective group who can work and support you on it. I mean, there's some terrific examples of how, you know, some trusts are developing really powerful educational experiences in the roundest sense for children through schools sharing resources and sharing, you know, talent amongst staff. So, you know, there's one clear one is Reach 2's 11 before 11, you know, which is, you know, there are numerous examples, but a commitment before every child reaches 11 years old to have a certain range of life experiences, which are led by, you know, they audit the staff across the schools. They know who has got the experience, you know, whether it's a musician, whether it's someone who, you know, a poet, whatever it may be, but somebody that brings something to not only to their individual school, but can to the group. And I think that's really powerful.
And I think also the digital aspect of this means that you can share it more easily. You know, we're all quite used to doing, and children are quite used to being presented in that way. Sam?
Not want to throw the damp cloth on that, because they're all the things we want to aspire to. But as soon as you said the word some mats can do this, and there's a divide, because some aren't. And some aren't. You know, I'm not going to name any names, but some are not good places to work in, and some are not maybe doing things for children in the right way, with the right values and beliefs. You know, that can easily be said of local authorities.
Local authority. I mean, we had an example this week, Stan, didn't we? We have seen that in the local authority.
So I'm not saying Matt's bad local authority is good. I'm saying that the moment you've got a some do this, you're introducing a divide again.
Can I just say, we're running at 30 minutes now, and I haven't even got to what's caught my eye this week. So can I just interrupt you?
Go for it, Frank.
All right, because actually we've managed to do this on 60 editions, so it'd be wrong for this one. So the one that's caught my eye is really, and there were quite a few, because I was interested in the ITTE Market review and what that says. I mean, perhaps we'll get onto that in a future. I mean, we had Sam Twistleton on here a few weeks ago, and it would be great if Sam's watching this, if she'd come back and join us to give her perspective on where that's all heading. But mine is really around Lord Baker and the comments he made about the new skills bill that's going through Parliament at the moment, and that he was making clear that that's not going to compensate for the failures of a school curriculum and the school experiences that young people have had in the lead up to that. And I think that was really an important statement to make, because I think for me, the education and skills being seen as separate is really quite damaging, because actually skills are then seen as a bit of an afterthought about, well, for kids that are probably not academic, they're going to go to university, that sort of thing. And I know that's probably not the case in some cases, but I think for people outside of, even within education and outside of education and skills, we need to bring those two terms together to make it more meaningful in terms of education. And actually, I think that some of the work that I've seen going on, whereby skills are something that employers pick up on, is, I think, a real risk to this, and just reinforces this idea that it is really just about employment stuff, you know, and it's for those kids that are not going to go to uni. That just reinforces all of that. So I think we need to sort of have a discussion about what that actually means, and that a good education has got to include skills and understanding. It's not just about knowledge.
Well, I don't think the definition of skills as applied knowledge helps at all.
Yes.
I mean, you know, I've got a wide knowledge of football, but funnily enough, I'm not playing for England this, and it doesn't matter how much I know.
Not this year.
Probably my ankle injury that stopped my career. But...
Yeah, we've told the story once before about Stan had Ryan Giggs in his junior football team, and didn't quite see it early enough, did you? The talent that he had, Stan.
Yeah, we just didn't spot it. We did very quickly afterwards, but not in the trials.
Okay, just so we can finish really with you, Michael. Where do you see the academy sort of trust policy going over the next year or two? You know, there's some sort of things happening at the moment that are causing concern that might affect the way it's heading.
I think and it comes back a little bit to what Stan was saying a moment ago. Actually, we've got to remember why academy trusts were established in the first place, and they were established because we recognised that actually the best people to set a vision for their schools and their communities are school leaders and teachers who work with pupils and young people every day, working with a board of trustees that is closely connected not only to communities but to the world out there, employment, you know, health, social care, whatever it may be. You know, there's a real power in that, and I think the risk is that if the direction of the trust sector becomes too determined by Whitehall, and the ability of trusts to innovate and make their own decisions becomes too curtailed by Whitehall, then there's a question as to actually why have we established academy trusts in the first place. So I think you know, this is a Conservative government. We're not getting political, but this is a Conservative government, and actually a Conservative government trusts the market to do things. Now, in this case, the market, I'm not talking about profit, I'm not talking about commercial connotations at all. I'm talking about a profession of highly experienced, talented school leaders and teachers working with trustees that really care about their communities to shape their schools and set direction for their schools. So, you know, and you could say the same about, you know, leadership development in education, training in education. Actually, you know, is government going too far in terms of its involvement and direction? And I'd ask that of this government, because what's their philosophy? You know, what is their philosophy? It's really interesting times. Will we have a new Secretary of State this summer? I'm not going to speculate on that, but I think it's really interesting that in the health sector, in the Department for Health, we've seen a big shift in philosophy actually over the last couple of weeks to one that I would say is probably what you would expect from a Conservative government. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but what I do like about the philosophy of the academy trust sector in its early days was that it trusted school leaders and trustees to get on. Now, I realise government had to intervene to an extent because we had some bad practice. We had some, you know, some terrible examples of trusts that went wrong, and we've got to regulate and we've got to protect. Yeah. And I think government has got a role there, and I'm really clear about that, you know. But actually, let's not lose sight of the fact that trusts need autonomy, and the profession needs some autonomy, like we see in the legal profession and the medical profession, actually, you know. Yeah. And that's an even bigger question for education.
I think you mentioned before, Stan, didn't you, that, you know, well, here we are, COVID, you know, we're coming out of lockdown, and we're going to trust you all, you know, you all know what to do, you know, but actually that approach is not replicated in the Department for Education, or it doesn't feel that way to me. We're being constrained and told, and there's this term we used to use, Stan, was preferred practice. Miriam Rosen, who was our mentor when we worked for Ofsted, you know, she said, you know, don't get yourself into preferred practice. You know, there's practice that works, and the thing to do is if you start going down preferred practice, you're starting to force people to do things in a certain way that might not suit them or might not simply work. And then you're blamed for the fact it doesn't work. So stay well clear of that. But we've got a department at the moment that's really crawling all over, whether that's teacher training, you know, whether that's phonics, whether that's, you know, actually, yeah, I mean, if you look at the market review in ITTE, I mean, it's so prescriptive. You know, the academic element of the profession seems to me to be stripped out of that. There's preferred practice all over it, you know, around cognition and stuff, you know, which may change. But okay, well,
I think it's fine. You know, I think the only thing I would add is, you know, and I think it's right to give the profession and to give communities much more involvement in shaping their trusts in schools. But I think the last thing I'd say on it is there needs to be a system of accountability to communities, and that's probably the most positive thing I'm seeing in the trust system at the moment, Frank and Stan, is trusts making themselves voluntarily, because there's no government direction around this, accountable to their communities publicly, to staff, to parents, to children. And I think the trusts that really get that right are going to be in a really exciting place to shape, you know, the next phase of education. So we'll see.
We'll see. All right. Well, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you, Stan. Just to say, last week I mentioned that this week Isha Asim would be our guest, but she's on next week. I got that wrong. It's also then the week after that, we've got Professor Rachel Lofthouse, who's probably going to have a word or two about the market review. And some big news is that we've secured Fiona Miller as a guest to join us in September. So we're really looking forward to that and grateful to Fiona to doing that. So anyway, we'll see you all being well. Who knows what's going to happen in the next week. Anyway, so...
it's coming home, Frank. That's the last word. It's coming home.
It's coming home. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all next week.